All right, so what is this?
Coffee.
Coffee, right? And so, but it's not your typical Folgers coffee. This coffee, as the bag says, is from Peru. And, we as college students, well, me typically, not you guys, but me, I love drinking coffee. And so today I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit more about coffee and how complex it actually is. So, to start off, like I said before, this coffee was originated from Peru. But what was the start of coffee, you might ask? Well, we don't really know. But there are legends and myths and theories that tell us what was the first cup of coffee. So many believe that coffee originated in Ethiopia, which might be maybe true because a lot of coffee is produced in Ethiopia. And so legend tells us that birds would feed on coffee cherries, which if you don't know, coffee is actually a fruit. It's actually a cherry that is grown on a tree. And someone apparently saw this a long time ago, saw birds eating off of it, and decided that he didn't want that bitterness of that cherry, so he decided to roast it. And lo and behold, coffee was born. And so, like I said before, not a lot of people know that coffee is actually a cherry. It's actually a fruit. And so that's interesting to learn about. And so you might be asking yourself, but how is coffee roasted, right? Why is it roasted? Like before, I said that it was to take away the bitterness of it. And you guys are probably thinking to yourself, bitterness, like it's still bitter. Like I drink it and it's still bitter. But honestly, it's way better in the truest form, which is the cherry form. And so an article by Frontier Plant Science talks about how, anything and everything can change how coffee tastes. And for me, I completely agree with this because when I'm tasting black coffee and stuff, I can taste differences in how it's been brewed and even to the point of where it was made. So like, for example, this one right here is from Peru, right? And so in some places, there are places like in Ethiopia, places in Mexico, places in Brazil that grow coffee. And so what we learn is that things from elevation to the moisture in the air to the time it takes to grow this coffee really changes the flavor of what you are getting. And so that was a study and an article found by Frontier Plant Science. And but there's different ways, the different ways and the different regions. So backtracking off of that, there are like about more than 70 countries, I'd say, that produce or grow coffee, and most of it, about I think it was like 60% of all coffee is grown in Brazil. And so, which is crazy to me because I think it was like 6.62 million pounds of coffee is produced in Brazil. And so what I want to talk to you guys about a little bit more is like, talking about, that background context of, every little thing counts when it comes to growing coffee. We've seen that climate change has also affected, coffee and its growth and what it tastes like, and not just that, but it also affects, the general of coffee. And so, for example, coffee produced in the region of Central America is recognized to be a climate change hotspot, and its vulnerability and risk, is it a bigger risk for climate, for increasing drought? We've seen hurricanes, we've seen things happen here in the Central American region. And so climate change scenarios in Central America indicate a drastic reduction in production of coffee. And that's important because, and this study was done by a group of, by that same company of science of plant science growers. And so, you know, we think about this, and it's important because of its economical impact. You know, coffee is produced and consumed so often by so many people around the world. And specifically in Central America, I'm gonna talk a little bit about Costa Rica. You know, in this article I was reading called Coffee Farming Families and Fair Trade in Costa Rica, it talks about how, you know, for the majority of the world, coffee is in their economy. Like, they produce coffee to make a living. There's a lot of small farms in Costa Rica that grow coffee and are reliant on this crop. And so, you know, just to know that there is, you know, climate change and everything that is affecting, it's not only affecting, you know, obviously our consumption of coffee, but it's also affecting families and people around the world that rely on this as a stable income for their families and stuff. So just some general knowledge on that. But to conclude, coffee is not just a cup of Folgers. Coffee is not just something that we use to caffeinate ourselves. It is something that is important just because of the value it has in the economy and as well as in production and all these other things. So coffee for you might look like just a black cup of coffee that's bitter, but for me, it is something super important.